Welcome to the Stillhouse Reflections, a quiet space to step outside the noise and consider what's real, what's yours, and what freedom can mean in everyday life. Hi there, it's Della. Welcome back to the Stillhouse Reflections. Let's get right into it today, talking a little bit more about obligation and responsibility, but this time from a little bit of a different lens. So last week we talked about it in terms of manufactured obligation. The idea that it is systemic obligation. It is the system pushing obligation on you, trying to lie to you and tell you that you are obligated to do things in order to simply survive. This week I want to bring that focus in a little bit. So obligation is heavy, externally imposed rules, ideas, ways of doing things. Responsibility is chosen by the individual. Ideally, it's clean and in alignment. It is not manufactured. It is not systemic. It is done so with the purpose of creating individual well-being. So I only take responsibility for things that I want to take responsibility for, and I only do it for as long as I want to do it. And then if I don't want to do it anymore, I simply let that thing go. That is clean responsibility. That's what it looks like. And we don't make walking away from things we no longer want to take responsibility for into a problem. We don't make that something that's bad. We don't shame people for making new choices, which is what we do currently. We allow people to make new choices. We allow that evolution. We allow people to follow their own alignment, whatever that might look like. So, simple examples can be relationships that don't work out and don't last. Jobs we don't like, right? So we don't make people bad for job hopping. We don't make people bad because they got divorced. We don't make people bad because they've decided they no longer want to do something. We don't turn them into awful human beings. We don't play the morality card, which, by the way, is also a lie. We don't play that card either. There's no such thing as good or bad. That's a human judgment call. It's not true. It's invented. A choice is just that. It's a choice. And if it's aligned for you, then there's nothing wrong with the choice. So what does it mean to be in alignment? What is that? Alignment is not based on pain. Alignment is not based on the thing that happened that you were 5. It isn't based on the stories you were told. It isn't based on systemic obligation. It isn't based on morality. It isn't based on judgment. It isn't based on fear. It isn't based on external rules. It isn't based on human rules. Alignment is totally you within yourself, your own personal, individual truth that has nothing to do with anything outside of you at all. And it is not based on any of the pain that you picked up along the way in your life. That is alignment. Alignment is not based on the stories that you tell yourself about what happened in your life. To follow your own alignment, more than likely, you're probably going to have to break a lot of the rules that you were taught, that you were brought up with. You're probably going to have to break them. That is alignment. Because your alignment probably isn't going to fall in the rules. It's not going to fall in the playbook for what you were told life was supposed to look like. It's just not going to. There's nothing wrong with that, and it doesn't make you a bad person. But the reason most people are out of alignment is because they don't allow themselves to follow that alignment because it doesn't follow the rules. That's it. That's the whole story. You're out of alignment not because you don't know what you want, but because you won't allow yourself to have it because it breaks the rules you told yourself about how life was supposed to look. So it means that we get very confused around the difference between alignment and obligation, or responsibility and obligation. We get confused because we think responsibility and obligation are equal, and they're not. They're not the same thing. They are completely different. And as I said in the live I did a few weeks ago, there is really nothing in life that you're obligated to. Nothing. Anything you feel obligated to is a human construct. It is a human invented idea. It is manufactured. The only thing you're truly obligated to in life is yourself. Because you're the one you have to put up with every day. That's it. Just you. You don't have to do anything else. You're not obligated to anything else other than yourself because you're the only one you have to put up with permanently. That's it. Just you. Everything else qualifies as chosen responsibility. From the job you have to the partner you take on to the kids you choose to have, everything is chosen. It's chosen. To the house you live in, the car you drive, everything is chosen. It's all chosen responsibilities. Now, are there places in there, and I'm going to acknowledge this, are there places in there where systemic obligation tries to kick in? Does systemic obligation try to force women to have kids they don't want? Yeah, absolutely. That's systemic obligation. That's systemic obligation disguised as morality. And that's a lie. Or religious beliefs. Still a lie. There is nothing wrong with religion and there is nothing wrong with morality when they are left as individual belief systems and they are not projected onto anybody. And we don't try to shape societies around them. But the minute we try to carve societies around morality and religion, we have problems. And you see them as systems try to force women to have children they don't want. That's what happens when you inject any sort of morality or religious belief into society in general. And you don't keep it as just a personal guidance system, which is what it's meant to be. So let's zoom in on daily life for a second. And let's talk about something as simple as laundry. Is laundry an obligation or a responsibility? I'm sure there are plenty of women out there who feel like laundry is an obligation because they're doing it for their entire families. They're doing it for kids who may or may not be old enough to do it for themselves. They're doing it for partners who are definitely old enough to do it for themselves. There's a degree of sort of hygiene involved in laundry. So it becomes something it's a responsibility that we take on. It's part of being humans, right? Animals like my dog, cats, they clean themselves, right? So they take responsibility for their own hygiene, right? So it's personal responsibility. And that's what it falls under. It's personal responsibility. When it tips into obligation, it's because we're trying to take care of it for other people. It's because we're doing it for people that can and should be able to do it for themselves. Right? When you're doing laundry for your teenage kids, you're taking on responsibility for something that they can take on themselves. And if that ever tips over into obligation, which is fine if you're doing it by choice, but if it ever tips over into obligation, if it's something that you no longer want to do, then you're free to pass that on to your kids. You don't have to do their laundry. And the same is true for your partner. You do not have to do their laundry. You are not obligated to that. The relationship structure doesn't immediately obligate one spouse or the other to doing laundry for both of you. Everybody can do their own laundry. Right? And I've lived in apartment buildings, and I recognize that when you have that shared laundry, it's easier to stock everybody's laundry up and then do it all together. And I understand that. But even within that, you can delegate. You can delegate tasks. You don't have to be the one to fold all the clothes. You don't have to be the one to put everybody's stuff away. There are places and ways to work that out so that it doesn't turn into obligation. When you're dividing up chores in the household, there's a difference between responsibility and obligation. Most of the chores in the house are just part of daily responsibility. They're not obligatory. Do you have to keep your house clean? No, there's no law book out there that says your house has to be spotless 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And by the way, most of the cleaning that people do falls outside just average hygiene. It falls into performative cleaning. It's performative. And the reason it's performative is because you're focused on what other people think about your space when they walk into it. You're more worried about what it looks like in your TikTok video than you really are about it actually being clean. There's a difference between hygienic cleaning and performative cleaning. And that can be an interesting conversation to have. What would I do if I was simply keeping my house hygienic, tidy? What do I do because I'm worried somebody might show up at my door? To truly clean your house, top to bottom, to truly clean it, if you really wanted it to be sterile, you would literally have to move out of your home, clean everything inside and out, and then put everything back in. And you would have to do that weekly. To create a sterile home environment. You're not going to do that. Nobody will do that. So what you're doing, because you're probably not cleaning under your bed, you're not cleaning behind that armoire you have in the corner, you're not cleaning under the dresser, you're not cleaning under the stove and the fridge, you're not moving those things on a regular basis. You're cleaning around a lot of things. Even the bookshelves behind, or the card shelves behind me, right? I don't move every deck. What do? I just clean out here. I clean this part of the shelf that you can see. That's performative cleaning. To truly clean the shelf, I need to take everything off, wipe it down, wipe everything off that's on it, and then put everything back. So most of the things we do are performative. Because I'm only cleaning what people can see, it's performative clean. Not hygienic clean. It's performative. And it's interesting when you start to look at those things, because performative cleaning happens through a lens of obligation. And the obligation comes from worrying about what other people think. And none of that is actually true. Right? So when we release obligation, if we're talking about cleaning, what does that look like? We worry less about whether you can see dust on the shelves. We worry less about vacuuming every 3 hours to keep it spotless, or to keep it looking spotless, because it's not really. We worry less about making the bed, for example, because unless you're taking the sheets off and washing them, making the bed is performative. It serves no hygienic purpose at all. It's all performative. And it becomes obligatory when it's performative because it starts to feel like a chore. And anything that feels heavy, like a chore, like something you have to keep up to, is a responsibility that's become an obligation. And so if you were to drop obligation and turn it back into what part of this is actual responsibility, what part of this actually serves, you'd probably do a lot less. What part of this is hygienic, and what part of this is obligatory? What part of this am I doing to please other people? Am I dusting my shelves to please other people, or am I dusting my shelves because I want to clean it? Obligation and responsibility in terms of those daily life things, those tasks that we all have. Some of them are hygienic, most of them are performative. It's an interesting conversation. And when you shift out of that, and believe me, I've had my share of tug of war with cleaning. When you shift out of that, and you just take responsibility for the things that need to be taken care of, that one can argue are hygienic needs, when you just take responsibility for maintaining cleanliness and some level of tidiness from a hygienic standpoint, you do a lot less cleaning. And you worry a lot less about what it looks like. And you stop performing. And when you stop performing, you take the obligation out of cleaning. There's some interesting things there. There's a lot of interesting stuff that you can play with in terms of obligation and responsibility and how they look. If you remove obligation, then what happens? What changes? And it's interesting how much we think that obligation is a rule. Obligation equals rules, but obligation isn't rules. And rules aren't obligatory. The running joke around here is that stop signs are suggestions. Well, rules are not obligatory. You're not obligated to follow the rules. Any rules. So what would you do if you simply made choices for yourself and followed your own alignment? What would that look like? What would you do if you only took responsibility for things that you wanted to take responsibility for? How would your life change if that was the case? If you can free yourself enough to have that conversation with yourself and not freak yourself out while you do it, sit down and think about it. If you dropped all the rules, dropped the idea of obligation, and looked at things you actually wanted to take responsibility for, what would you do? And what would your life look like? I think you'll be surprised at how many things you do because you feel obligated to them or because somebody told you were supposed to. It's a very, very interesting rabbit hole to go down. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I will talk to you next week. This has been Della with the Stillhouse Reflections. Bye for now. Thanks for spending this time with me. May these reflections stay with you and keep opening new ways of seeing until we meet again at the Stillhouse.